of Hawaii.
Welcome to ThinkTech Radio's Focus on Asia. Today's segment is Issues and Insights, sponsored by Pacific Forum CSIS. And now your host, international business lawyer David Day.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights. We have got a firecracker of a program for you today. We're going to be talking about Myanmar and its way ahead, or the way ahead, and we want to dispel, perhaps, for some of you, the total illusion of progress, and perhaps talk about building some bridges for the future success of that country. And we've got some very unusual guests in the studio today. Many of you have heard the voice of Kerry Gershaneck before. He is the Senior Associate for Pacific Forum CSIS and in charge of governmental affairs and public relations, something like that. Kerry, nice to have you again.
Oh, thanks for being allowing me on the show again, David.
And we also have a lady that is, well, I'll let you be the judge. She's a very remarkable American woman, Ms. Paula Helfrich. Paula, welcome to Asian Review. It's nice. Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights. It's nice to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you a little bit about Paula. You have met Kerry before, but Paula is a very unusual American woman in that she was born in Myanmar, and we'll straighten out this Myanmar-Burma thing a little later on in the program, but the correct name is Myanmar. She was born there. And interestingly, her parents, as I understand it, Paul, they both served the United States in World War II as members of the OSS.
Well, my dad was with the OSS, X-2 Detachment, Kachin Rangers, and my mother was a naval intelligence codebreaker in Washington, D.C.
So the two parents had a interesting connection with the British colony of Burma at that time.
At that time, that's correct.
And so, what after the war, your parents returned to Burma, to Myanmar?
They were invited to return to help with reconstruction. My father had worked very closely with the then the 30 Thakins, the 30 leaders of Myanmar, the sort of government in exile, if you will, in many ways, who led the charge for independence from the 1930s, their student days, through 1948 and independence.
So your parents really were steeped in the knowledge of this country from over many decades of time.
Yes, that's correct.
And you grew up there, what, first 17 years or so of your life?
Mm-hmm.
You went to
That's
grade
correct.
school there?
Went to Myanmar, or mission schools, in Molamyang, Yangon, Kalaw, and then I failed third standard and got shipped off to India to go to school in Darjeeling.
And so one of your classmates while you were growing up was the
lady named Daw Aung San. Well, she was then Ma Aung San Suu Kyi.
Aung San Suu Kyi. So you knew her as a little
As a little girl.
As a little girl.
We both had big ears. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, one of the things that we want to do with this program, ladies and gentlemen, is talk about some issues with the country of Myanmar that you would not have heard or you cannot hear from the major international media. And we're going to do some things on this program with this lady who is truly an expert on this country that you may not have heard before. And I do want to mention to you that if we fast forward the DVD of your life, Paula, today you are working with a group called the Charlton Group. Is that correct?
That's a new job. I've actually been teaching for the last 6 years with one of the a very large local school system that has about 30 campuses all over the country, as well as the Sidigu Monastery, which is an international Buddhist academy, where I've basically been hopscotching students into Western universities.
Okay, so you have this many years of your life where you're living in this country.
Yes.
And then you come to Hawaii here for several years,
Yes.
live on the Big Island, and then you move back and you have this many years of teaching there in Myanmar. And in addition to your teaching experience, today you work with a group out of Hong Kong,
Yes,
the
the Charlton Group, yeah.
How do you pronounce it?
Charlton.
Charlton Group, and that group does what in Myanmar?
They have started up an investment consultancy, and they are basically an investment leveraging and legal consultancy. They've been in Asia for about 25 years and are most interested in assisting in growing many different facets of life in Myanmar.
So, Paula, if there are business people out here in the audience who are listening to this or watching this show, and they have an interest in doing business in Myanmar, are you a person that they can contact to begin to?
Well, they can eventually, but what they need to do is define a plan of what they want to get involved in. They want to find good connections first. They want to develop those contacts as good and trusted friends. It's a very slow process. Unfortunately, what we see these days is people come in and expect to be able to respond instantly to interest, and relationship building is not so quick in Myanmar or in most places in Southeast Asia. It's a process of time and trust.
Let me change the direction of the conversation
Sure.
with you for just a second here. You know, in early on when we were talking about kind of the beginning of this program, I mentioned that we were going to talk about some things here that our audience were not going to be able to find in the international media. And so, you know, we've all seen in the international media these very dramatic reforms that are underway, and that's grabbed the headlines, and it's not really clear where the progress is really going, and so that'll be the thrust of this program. But my question to you is, why does the international media focus on the same stories, the same people, time and time again? And it's almost as if Carrie and I could write the article or do the interview for them. Why is that?
I think in large part because it's a very romantic story. You know, the peeling paint old generals, you know, they're all bad guys, dark figures. And then you have this noble people that have come forward starting in 2007 with what's called the Saffron Revolution, although the process of change started well before that. And then this very noble woman in 2008 who took on...
This is the Asian Joan of Arc.
Yes, the Asian Joan of Arc. Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, who is the daughter of the kin that led the revolution for independence in the 30s and 40s. So you've got this multi-generational love affair with a heroine and with the possibility of change.
Okay, and we're going to get in this program.
Yeah.
What we want to do, Paula, is get kind of beyond that.
Good.
But Carrie, what I'd like you to do is, you know, there's some beautiful language that you can find on some websites, tourist brochures that describe Myanmar. And for those in our audience that may not have heard this description, would you paint that picture of the tourist brochure, and then we're going to come back to Paula with what the reality is
real.
like, what's real on the dirt, on the ground there. So Carrie, would you take it away, please?
Myanmar, if you go to the Chamber of Commerce handouts or the tourism websites, it's a paradise of idyllic proportions, glittering pagodas, a wealth of cultures, colorful festivals and arts, lush, fertile plains, vast virgin jungles, and majestic snow-capped mountains. Well, that's true, and as is the emphasis on the most gracious and hospitable people in the world. Now, this is not false. This is in fact true, but of course, left out of this, as with all tourism brochures and propaganda, is there's a very dark side to it. There is another side to this. So, you know, we're in the mode on this show of debunking mythology and correcting historical untruths. So basically what we have to understand as we go into this discussion is this is a country that's emerging after 60 years of generally brutal self-destructive dictatorship.
And let's not forget 125 years of
Colonial-
brutal colonial
colonialism,
dictatorship,
exactly.
along with most of the rest of Asia.
Exactly, and the result of this, or one of the reasons that things are so difficult there, is because there's huge ethnic and religious divisions that we'll discuss throughout the show, and it's a country that has problems. It's the poorest country in Southeast Asia. As a result, there's huge narcotics issues involved. It's a country that is the third largest producer of drugs like opium, methamphetamine, and heroin.
What about trafficking?
Human trafficking is huge out of there. It's women, men, children are sold for hard labor and sexual exploitation on a massive scale. And perhaps we'll talk about that in the organization here, a Pacific Gateway Center that helps to fight that. Its military still has strong ties to North Korea, and it's got shadowy ties with the People's Republic of China Armed Forces. U.S. Treasury Department just this week sanctioned Lieutenant General, very senior general in the military there, for buying weapons, arms, and material from North Korea in violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1874. So it's a country with problems.
We've got more, and we'll get you the real picture on the ground when we come back after the break.
And there's a good side.
There's a good side too.
760 KGU.
Part of the Wall Street Business Network.
Traffic in town is busy on the H1 in both directions. If you're coming in from the west side, the slowdown starts at the Middle Street Merge. If you're coming in from the east, the slowdown starts at UH. Going west from town, the H1 slows at the west end of the airport viaduct, the Moanalua at Moanalua Gardens. No problems to the windward side. That looks normal, and no problems going east out to Hawaii Kai.
Pacific Forum CSIS is a nonprofit, nonpartisan foreign policy organization affiliated with the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. From right here in Honolulu, Pacific Forum has, since 1975, provided analysis on current and emerging political, economic, business, and security issues for leaders throughout the U.S. and Asia. Also, the Pacific Forum Young Leaders Program brings young professionals and next-generation leaders from around the U.S., Asia, and Europe together to observe and participate in high-level, multinational dialogues normally reserved for senior policy experts. To provide your support for the Young Leaders Program and to send future generation leaders abroad to ensure peace and prosperity in the Pacific, please contact Pacific Forum at 808-521-6745. That's 808-521-6745. Or you can visit them on the web at pacforum.org. That's PACforum.org.
Your product is selling well locally, so why export? Because 95% of all consumers live in foreign markets. Why not expand your market and increase your sales with help from the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone, your hub of international trade in Hawaii? The Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone offers you the services and support you need to start, grow, and succeed in your import-export business. Find them on Facebook at /Hawaii FTZ or on the web at www.ftz9.org.
We're live, and you can join the conversation by calling us at area code 808-296-5467. This is Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights, and today we're talking about Myanmar in transition. Our guests in the studio are Mr. Kerry Gershaneck from Pacific Forum CSIS and Ms. Paula Helfrich from Yangon, Myanmar.
You said it just right.
Not bad for an amateur, huh?
Not bad.
Okay, we've had the tourist brochure description balanced off with a little bit of reality, Paula. And what I want to ask you now, coming back to the earlier suggestion, why is it that the international media don't get in and tell the true story of what's really happening? Are they just sitting around in hotel lobbies?
Well, I think it's because of the reputation that precedes it, because of things that have happened in the last 15 or 20 or 30 years. Most of these reporters are quite young. I'm 800 years old, so I'm not afraid to ride the 80-year-old Leyland buses that were there right after the war that have lasted as long as I have. So it's an enormously eccentric place to live because infrastructure is very, very different from the West.
Well, and what do you mean by that?
Well, if you are sitting in a restaurant and the lights go off, you don't quit eating, you just keep talking, and sooner or later somebody brings a candle. In the West, people would be screaming and running, right? In general circumstances, if your telephone doesn't work, you will be in overdrive. There, you wait until it's fixed. You don't worry about it because there's nothing you can do. Same thing with internet, daily basis. And this was up until recently. Now we have pretty much 24-hour everything. But you would have to get online using proxy servers. I don't think most people in the United States know what that is.
Explain to the audience. What did you? This is because in the older days, the military junta blocked the access.
It wasn't so much blocked; it was just broken. And getting it fixed was,
Okay.
You go talk to a young techie, and the techie says, "Yeah, V channel, Z channel, what? He's going through Romania and Timbuktu, and who knew?" And he got you onto Google, but you were able to make connectivity. Nowadays, and it will never go back again, I think. Nowadays, it's universal communication. And that's probably the biggest change of all. The second biggest change, as I said, was a couple days ago, was the amount of visitors that are coming in now. We've had over 1 million visitors come in last year, not without challenges, but we have 36 separate airlines moving in and out.
36
all the way
airlines.
from Doha, Dubai, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Japan, Korea, you name it. Before, it used to be 2 flights a day to Bangkok. Now it's truly an international destination. And that's not without challenges, because one of the first things that the government did in this process of reform was allow a process of turning in the old cars. First, the 40-year-old cars, then the 30-year-old cars, then the 20-year-old cars, and then they said, everybody, you can go buy a car. So everybody took the money out from under the mattress, it's an all-cash economy, and went and bought cars. So now we have traffic jams, just like the West. Now, is that good or bad? You don't
All right.
know.
Well, what about just very briefly? What's it like to do business there?
If you are Myanmar, you are accustomed to a process of relationships and bartering and trade. You almost never worry about a contract. You shake hands and you go to work and you do business. You can't do business like that internationally. So one of the first things that has happened is that all of the ASEAN countries, particularly Thailand and Malaysia, our closest neighbors, have come in to assist in that process of change. The first fast food restaurant is the Lotteria, and it's coming in, yes, fried chicken from Malaysia. So they have had a great reception. And the opportunity now is, okay, the West wants to come in and do business, maybe it's easier to start working with an ASEAN partner who will bring you in and offer, I shouldn't give away these kind of business secrets, right?
No, but go ahead. I'm sure there
yeah,
are some
there
that would
you
like
are.
to know. You're coming in
you-
directly through somebody else in
Yes,
one of the other ASEAN.
that is familiar with the process of doing business in Asia, because it is very different than it is here. The currency exchange regulations and the banking difficulties are still, unfortunately, although theoretically sanctions have been lifted, they haven't really moved. And the West, especially the United States and UK, are having great deal of difficulty getting into contractual situations.
Because of the sanctions of
Well,
their own
that's
countries.
part of it. The second part is, unfortunately, those two countries have refused to accept international protocol of the United Nations and call a country by its name.
You mean this challenge over whether it's Burma or Myanmar is blocking
it's
business?
contractual. Exactly. You cannot sign a contract in a country and call it by a colonial name. I think that's true in every single one, whether it was India or Singapore or Vietnam.
Okay, so the colonial name was Burma. The correct name is Myanmar.
Myanmar.
And why is this refusal of the United States government, State Department, whatever, to use the correct name? Is that part of the fancy, high-powered, high-tech carrot and stick approach that the United States is taking?
I'm afraid I think that's how I would characterize it. It is unnecessary. It makes us look like small people. Us meaning U.S. I want the United States to succeed in Myanmar, as elsewhere in Asia, because I've been associated with many of those countries processing
Okay, ladies and
change.
gentlemen, you heard
Yeah.
it here first. It's Myanmar, not Burma.
Yes. And it's
Regardless of what
Yangon.
the State Department tells you.
Yes, it's Yangon, which means the absence of strife, not Rangoon, which means nothing.
Okay,
So-
okay, very good. Let's do one other thing before the break comes up here.
Sure.
And Carrie and Paula, would the two of you kind of jump in here and help me? What's the connection, so that folks listening to this show know, what's the connection between Hawaii and Myanmar, other than they're in the same half of the world? What's the bridge there, Carrie?
Well, there's a number of connections here. The East-West Center, of course, one of our great institutions here in Hawaii in terms of foreign policy and security issues. You have three great institutions: East-West Center, my organization, Pacific Forum, CSIS, and then the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies. East-West Center has a very long and very distinguished and honorable connection with Myanmar.
Okay.
And there's a number of programs that we could talk about in a little while, to include an upcoming journalism conference that will be coming up in March of this coming year.
Here?
In Myanmar.
Oh, in Myanmar.
To
The
bring
East-West
the
Center's gonna
focus right on
host?
that. And staff leaders over there like Karen Knudsen and others are routinely engaged in Myanmar and bringing programs there and visiting and keeping that relationship even during the harshest parts of the carrot and stick time period with the U.S., where we were trying to change the government. They were engaged. My organization, of course, Pacific Forum, has been engaged historically. At the academic level, we can talk about that later, but I think most fascinating is the story of the Aloha medical missions, and then
Yeah.
I'll
What are
defer
they
to
doing
you.
there?
Well, that's very grassroots, and that started again as sort of a family relationship thing. And Aloha Medical Mission wanted to go. They said, talk to the Department of Health. We said, no, we'll talk to the monks. The monks basically take care of a lot of the educational and healthcare infrastructure. And this one particular monk, Unyanitara, who comes to Hawaii quite often, he opened up his monastic hospital. At that time, he had one. And he brought in 25 doctors and nurses from Hawaii, Honolulu and Hilo, under Dr. Carl Lum. They've been back about maybe, I think, a total of 12 to 15 missions, including during Hurricane Nargis, when they served aboard USS Mercy in the Andaman Sea. And over that period of time, they've operated, I can't even count, but I would say it's in excess of 10,000 operations and certainly serious medical procedures.
Jeez.
Yeah.
But I want to Normally, as a host, I never do this on a show, but I want to add a little bit to this bridge the two of you are talking about. Before I do that, real quick, do we have immigrants from Myanmar here in Hawaii?
About 400 members of the Myanmar community.
Okay.
There, many of them doctors, lawyers, merchants, chiefs, and they are now taking the trips back to Myanmar and becoming, just as happened in Vietnam, they are becoming the next generation of support, in that they're looking at, hey, possibly retiring there, possibly their children going back and doing missions there. And again, providing that level of not only Myanmar comfort, but also an ambassadorship for American values in Myanmar, so that it's not uncomfortable, the transition.
Let me try something on the two of you. You know, looking at the Hawaii's bridge, or the bridge between Myanmar and Hawaii, both of you think highly, as do I, of the East-West Center. They have built an enormous bridge by way of alumni network.
Yes.
Yes, they have.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they
We'll have more when we come back after the break. Stay with us. We'll be talking about Myanmar in transition next.
Good word. Transition.
760 KGU.
Part of the Wall Street Business Network.
Traffic in town is busy on the H1 in both directions. If you're coming in from the west side, the slowdown starts at the Middle Street Merge. If you're coming in from the east, the slowdown starts at UH. Going west from town, the H1 slows at the west end of the airport viaduct, the Moanalua at Moanalua Gardens. No problems to the windward side. That looks normal, and no problems going east out to Hawaii Kai.
Hawaii, the state of clean energy, is also brought to you by Hawaiian Electric Company, powering the growth and development of Hawaii since it was chartered by King Kalakaua in 1891. Today, Hawaiian Electric and its subsidiaries, Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company, serve more than 95% of our state, providing reliable electric service essential to our quality of life. The Hawaiian Electric companies are also leading our transition to clean energy. By increasing our renewable energy use and improving energy efficiency, we're reducing Hawaii's dependence on imported oil and providing a more sustainable and secure future for Hawaii. For more information, visit hawaiisenergyfuture.com.
ThinkTech Hawaii is a Hawaii nonprofit corporation organized in the year 2000. Its purpose is to raise public awareness about the importance of technology, energy, agriculture, and globalism to the diversification and expansion of our economy. We do this by television shows on community television and on OC16, by newspaper articles, and by our ThinkTech radio series on KGU 760 AM. We also do it by panel programs and events, including our monthly luncheon programs with the Hawaii Venture Capital Association. ThinkTech, working to raise public awareness in Hawaii. Check us out at thinktechhawaii.com.
We are live, and this is Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights. We're talking about Myanmar in transition and its way ahead in the future. Our guests in the studio, Mr. Kerry Gershaneck from Pacific Forum CSIS and Ms. Paula Helfrich. Paula is a resident of Yangon, Myanmar, and an American who has lived in that country since she was a little, tiny little baby. You were
23
born-
years all told.
What's the name of the city that you were born in?
Molamiang.
And where is that?
It's in the Tenasserim coast. It's
the south.
southeast, yeah.
Let's get into, Paula, a little bit about the foreign policy aspect of what the United States has done to I want to say, rebuild the relationship with Myanmar. And I realize maybe the correct way of saying is that there's been one small step forward with others to follow. What has the United States done correctly in its foreign policy approach to Myanmar? What do you see as the
Well,
plus
in the
side?
past, during World War II, the United States was the great hope for assistance with independence. So they started that whole process of change.
Franklin
in
Roosevelt's
the 40s,
anti-colonial.
in the 50s, yeah. And because of that, there's an enormous upswell of support for America and Americans, especially American visitors. Sometimes the policy initiatives maybe are a little bit further behind than they need to be.
What do you, that's, say it.
Sanctions was not necessary. Sanctions have really overstayed their welcome. And the very best thing we could possibly do is to get beyond calling the country by other than its proper name.
You mean this
number one.
Burma-Myanmar thing?
Burma-Myanmar, that's number one. Number two, I really feel sorry for the people who work at the embassy. They're dedicated professional foreign service staffers. They don't have the budget and they don't have the wherewithal to entertain this constant stream of distinguished visitors and get on with the business of nation building. That's another problem.
So too much visiting by
Too much
mid-level
visiting
bureaucrats from
yeah,
Washington?
right.
Okay.
Who all, pardon me, they all want to rush off to see one particular charismatic lady in Myanmar. They're not particularly interested with learning the day-to-day truth.
We'll get back to her in a
Yes.
moment.
Uh-huh.
Continue with what's
Right.
number three.
Okay. And number three is the opportunity to engage with Myanmar people on a regular basis. Somehow the doors seem to have closed. We had career professionals, foreign service officials before who brought a lot of wide variety of ethnic minorities and political aspirants, intellectuals, academics. That doesn't seem to be happening right now.
Is
and
that?
again, I think it's a function of time.
Do you think the people of Myanmar, they would like to see the United States applaud their reforms a little bit more?
100%. The carrot and stick approach was unnecessary to begin with, but now that Myanmar has succeeded in implementing and starting, not they haven't implemented all of them by any means, but starting this enormous process of change from being closed for 60 years. Yeah, give them a pat on the back. Mr. Obama coming to Myanmar. Now, his name, Obama. Bama is the name of the Burmese people. So that gives a big swell. There were 200,000 people on the streets when he came into town. That was an enormous thing. When he addressed the people and said Myanmar Nainganja, he addressed it by its correct name. 3 weeks ago, he talked to President Thein Sein at the White House and used the term again 15 times. And it was applauded throughout Myanmar. It was not even reported in the Western press. And the State Department went on with Myanmar, or with Burma.
The
So,
State Department is stuck on that Burma
yeah,
thing.
and we who live there, citizens and Myanmar people, we're puzzled.
Is the United States using the name Burma, is that part of the stick? We're not going to give you
I'm
your
not sure if
credit?
it's intentional or if it's habit, but certainly it's inappropriate at this point in time when everybody else in the world has followed the ASEAN lead and supports the name of the country as it stands.
Aung San Suu Kyi.
Yes.
You grew up with her as a young girl. You know her.
I knew her slightly, as do any 6, 7, 8-year-olds. After that, our ways parted because her mother went to India as the Myanmar ambassador, and I went to school in Darjeeling, which is another place. And, however, the paths cross. Everybody kind of knows everybody. I know a lot of people who were certainly her chiefs of staff and her supporters who have done very serious jail time. And they are, again, the intellectuals and the lifeblood of the country. And I would encourage the doors of the U.S. Embassy to be open to discussion with all of those folks.
Let me try something.
Knowledgeable, yeah.
It's my impression that the senior U.S. government officials, political leaders, and also the international media, they all focus on this Asian Joan of Arc as the lone white horse in that country to be ridden. And do you see the U.S. ambassador doing that? Is the U.S. ambassador guilty of that?
I'd like to say differently, but that, again, I think that's because of the interest expressed by his visiting dignitaries and his media associates. She has been, Aung San Suu Kyi is an enormously charismatic figure, but there are 34 political parties active in the country, and all voices need to be heard so that the U.S. is not perceived as backing one player. That would be both un-American, undemocratic, and quite unfortunate.
Different topic, Paula. I've always wondered, how did this, we had this dark dictatorship, this military junta that ruled this country and kept Aung San Suu Kyi locked up like some fairy tale princess in a castle for years and years and years. And all of a sudden, it's like somebody got religion and the light sort of came on in the last couple of years. And I find it hard to believe that it was Hillary Clinton showing up with a big hug that caused the whole thing. And what's the real story? How did that reform take place?
There has been a General Kinyon, who ruled the country several years ago, about 15 years ago. He put together a 10-year plan for democracy, basically. It's a 10-year plan for something, disciplined, flourishing democracy, whatever. And we may not agree with all the terms, but they put together a plan of sorts, and that's what they have been doing. And it included normalization of relationships. It included freeing of political prisoners of conscience, including Aung San Suu Kyi.
What caused him to all of a sudden sit down and write out this 10-point plan?
I don't think it was all of a sudden. I think it was a process of realization that their way was not getting them where they needed to go. Just as sanctions didn't work for the U.S., the junta's brutality was not working at all. So something needed to give.
But what you're saying is that the brutality wasn't working,
right?
But something had to have happened, like light dawning on Marblehead, that caused the junta to start to think about the future and that they weren't.
I think they don't think as one. I think there are any number. There's about 250, 300,000 members of the armed services. There are 400,000 monks. There are a number of other clerics, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, around the country, who also come forward because these are very, very religious countries and very religious people in all aspects. I would say probably the number one group that has affected change was the All Myanmar Women's League. And those are the powers behind the powers, who basically spoke to their monks, spoke to their clerics, and said, how can we change? And
was this after the 2007 crackdown on the monks?
Very good. That was where the process started, because 1988, the student revolution, which ended very badly. There were a number of other things. When U Thant died and his body was taken back, there was revolution. All was led by the monks and also by the people who got out front. And the monks would tell them, get out of the way. We have no fear. You have family obligations. You cannot get hurt. The women went in to talk to their husbands.
These are the ladies who were wives of the
sisters,
generals.
Mothers, aunties, cousins, whatever. And they basically started this process of, if the monks were saying, you must change, they would say to the monks, but please help my husband, please help him. And they would say, and I've heard them say, we cannot help. Your husbands know what they must do. It's a Buddhist way. But the whole process of articulating that change went after 2007, which was led by the monks with the basically protesting against price increases. 2008, which was the Nargis hurricane, was seen as retribution, divine retribution.
Wait a minute, let's see, for our audience now, let's see if we can follow this.
Okay.
2007, there was a crackdown on the monks.
Right.
And then
And
following that,
people were killed.
Lots
Many
of people got killed.
Yeah.
And following that, the ladies' organization called, what was the name of that group?
The All Myanmar Women's League.
All
Yeah.
Myanmar Women's League
Yeah.
starts talking to their husbands.
Well, I'm not going to put a time span on
All
it.
right.
I think it probably started before that.
All right,
but
but
never mind.
But
It
the
was-
pressure
yes,
builds
the
after
pressure started
2007.
building, yes.
And then in 2008, this brutal cyclone Nargis
Right.
hits the Irrawaddy Delta and
That's
kills
correct.
how many people?
140,000.
Yeah.
140,000 people.
One night.
Now, is there in the minds of the Myanmar leadership, was there a linkage between the killing of the monks and Cyclone Nargis killing 140,000 of their people?
If you believe in karma, then the answer is very obviously yes. If you don't believe in karma, then nothing will convince you that there was a connection. So it's a long, long road that they're traveling on this. The next thing that happened basically was...
Hold
sorry.
on. We're going to go to a break because there's
Okay.
more to this story and more to come. Stay with us.
Okay, well,
760 KGU.
Part of the Wall Street Business Network.
No accidents or stalls on any of our major roads. The last accident was that one on the H1 eastbound at the Punahou overpass. Going west, the H1 slows at the Eva end of the airport viaduct. The Moana Lewis slows at Fort Shafter Flats. You're going to be in heavy traffic until the Waimalo Pearl City exit. The drive east is fine to Hawaii Kai, and no problems if you're headed over the mountains to the windward side.
ThinkTech always brings unparalleled media depth to its programs, and our show Asia in Review is no exception. The Thursday Asia Business and Foreign Policy shows here on ThinkTech are hosted by David Day, a well-known international lawyer with extensive experience in the business and geopolitical issues of the Asia-Pacific region. Come join David as ThinkTech illuminates Hawaii's bridge to Asia with fascinating and lively discussions, featuring experts who unwind the critical issues and then probe for the solutions. Asia in Review with David Day.
Hawaii, the state of clean energy, is also brought to you by the State Energy Office of the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. How can we secure a better future for Hawaii? One way is clean energy, and the State Energy Office is steering Hawaii to that clean energy future. Hawaii is rich with natural renewable resources, the sun, the wind, the ocean, and the land, and they are all being tapped to meet Hawaii's clean energy initiatives to generate electricity, create jobs, spur economic growth, and reduce our dependence on imported foreign oil. To learn more, visit energy.hawaii.gov.
We are back. We are live, and we are talking about Myanmar and transition. You are listening to Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights, And our guest in the studio, Mr. Kerry Gershaneck from Pacific Forum, in case you've just joined us, and the wonderful, one and only, all the way from Yangon, Myanmar, this remarkable American lady who was born there and knows her way around on the dirt there, Paula Helfrich. Paula, Kerry and I are having so much fun here. I hope it's okay with you, and ladies and gentlemen, I hope it's okay with you as well. At the break, we were talking about this very influential women's organization that you have identified as playing a major role in influencing husbands and brothers in the reform direction. And I want to go back to early history in Myanmar, pre-colonial times. Is my understanding correct that this was truly a matriarchal society?
Well, I don't know if you would characterize it as matriarchal, but you would definitely have seen for 2,000 years women's rights way ahead of just about any place else in Asia.
Even in a military context?
Even in a military context. Women had their own names, their own jewelry, their own gold, their own land, their own education, their own careers. They were always encouraged and never discouraged from any careers, including military. So they were warriors in many different senses. When the British came in, unfortunately, probably more the British mem sahibs didn't like the freedom that Myanmar women had, and it became, or there was attempts to seriously curtail it. The All Myanmar Women's League came into being because of that, so that there has been a reminder consistent with history that women will assist in leading the country, and they have. Obviously, Aung San Suu Kyi is a role model for that. Yes.
And the influence of the Myanmar Women's League.
Yes.
Very influential. What about in terms of the country seems to be torn by ethnic strife?
Yes. Yeah. It's
very
sad.
quickly.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Well, there's several different types of strife. You've got what's happening in Kachin State and Rakhine State, and all the minority states, the 7 different minority states, the majority, there's 135 ethnic groups, but there's 7 states which take up most of those. They sided with the British during World War II, whereas the Burmese, did not. They only wanted independence, so that was an issue. And it has remained so from 1935 until really pretty much the present day.
So what we're seeing today is
it's historical.
Historical split from colonial independence
days. The British brought the worst of it has been that the British brought in well in excess of 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 plantation workers from what was then East Pakistan and South India to work in the sugar plantations near Yangon. And that has led to a perception, and an increasing modern day perception, and within the last 2 years perception, that there is widespread ethnic violence and strife.
We're going to move off the topic of ethnic groups here, but in connection with the Muslim groups in Myanmar, does Myanmar now face an Al-Qaeda threat or problem?
I certainly hope not, but there's a sort of a rogue monk who would make one think so, who is fostering hate speech and violence, and that's most inappropriate, and he is being taken to task by his Sangha leadership. At the same time, there's an absolute necessity for people to be familiar with the Rakhine report, in which that is discussed at length, in which the roles are described. And in contrary to some headlines, the role of Myanmar right now is in recognizing 3 poor groups in the poorest state, in the poorest nation in Southeast Asia. That is Buddhist Rakhine, Muslim Rakhine, and a group that is currently known in the Western media and self-styled as Rohingya, but which are termed ethnic minorities and possibly other groups.
Okay. We've got a question from a member of our studio audience here. Remember, you can apply to join our studio audience, and there's some ways that you do that. I'm not going to take time, but so, sir, just give us your first name.
Hi, my name is Billy.
Okay, Billy, what's your question?
My question is regarding to the topic of the Rohingyas. The Time magazine just came out with a special issue which is called The Buddhist Face of Terror, and about the 969 squad, about what we've been doing against the Muslim. And I wanted to hear your perspective about Buddhist violence, Buddhist monk.
Okay, I
violence.
referred already to him as a rogue monk, and he is not operating in a proper Buddhist context in any way, shape, or form. His speech and his hatred is not appropriate. His inciting to violence against Muslims and his discussion of 969, which is using Buddhist philosophy to not support Muslim businesses, if you will. In the context of the Rakhine Report, Malaysia, the Qatar Foundation, all of the ASEAN Muslim countries have come in, as well as the Ali Khan Fund and others, to help and support us to find a collective way, all of the religious groups working together to find this. I do truly believe that there will be, that it will be resolved, but it takes everybody holding hands. This article that you mentioned is written by a woman who has written 3 articles, all of which are not in any way, shape, or form objective. She is a sensationalist, I'm sorry to say, and she has misused her position as a journalist in this
We're almost out of time
regard.
here, and I've
Okay,
got to ask
sorry.
you. We gotta. Let's hit the fast forward on the DVD.
Yes.
Let's look forward 5 years. What do you see the country of Myanmar looking like for our
A model of peace, number one.
Okay.
Number one, a model of peace. Number two, the beginnings of infrastructure replacement, the beginnings of economic recovery, especially in the poorest areas. And economic recovery will go a long way towards ameliorating any of the racial and violence issues that are of concern to everybody that lives in the country. The opportunity also for the 3rd cycle of elections, the judicial reform, which we see coming. Those are all probably the most serious underpinnings to success for the following generation.
Okay, so at the 10-year mark.
The
from now?
10-year mark, I'm saying it's back to the future. When I was born and raised, it was the richest country in Southeast Asia. Now it's the poorest. I believe it will be back at least at the top of the pile. We will have the import-export relations. We will have the education. We will have definitely the infrastructure put back in place. And hopefully we will have the opportunity for people to understand that Theravada, and I'm Christian, I'm not Theravada, but I have great respect for all of the religious sort of cohabitation that I'm used to. We will be a model country for many places in the world, and hopefully not quite as affluent, not so much change, so that we lose the charm of the place.
Kerry, last word to you. What do you see the U.S. role being in this next decade coming up here?
Well, our role will be to continue to try to help the transition and to democracy and to greater human rights over there. Mm-hmm. And Myanmar has a wonderful opportunity to showcase its progress along the way, that 10-year, 5-year, 10-year time frame that you and Paula just talked about. They'll be hosting the Southeast Asia Games. In addition, then they'll have their elections in 2015, as Paula discussed. And Myanmar also assumes the chair of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in 2014, and that's huge. And they have a chance to show that they're credible, that they will lead with integrity and with competence, and not necessarily every other chair country has done that. So Myanmar has great potential, as Paula has said, and I think cumulatively we're very optimistic about the future, despite all the negatives we've discussed today.
Interesting. We're just about out of time here, and Paula, I want to see if I can sneak in one last question here.
Sure.
Countries to help Myanmar reform, who were they?
Japan, number 1, Israel, number 2, and now Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, again, the neighbor countries who've stood by it. Now India appears to be coming into play. But above all, I think there's a common concern that if they do not work together, that there's a very large country to the north that would like to have a lot more to say about all of Asia. And I think there's not a shared feeling that that's good for the region.
And Myanmar took a very dramatic move.
Indeed. Mitson Dam.
Mitson Dam to push
and
the Chinese
Dam, Lepadang copper mines, yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you for a wonderful time. And this has been Pacific Forum's Issues and Insights. We've been talking about Myanmar with Kerry Gershaneck and Paula Helfrich. Please have a safe drive home.